What are the key elements of pre-service preparation that can ready students and new teachers for the very real challenges that they will face entering our profession and entering their classrooms?
Teachers engaged with expert teachers in schools, preferably in schools that are designed and organized to support learning to teach the whole time that you're taking courses.
Right.
You can't do this kind of, study a bunch of theory for 4 years and then take 8 weeks of student teaching on the end and hope that you remember all the stuff you learned in theory that you weren't practicing, and then go into a classroom where you don't see those same things emulated. So great programs connect expert teachers who are engaged in productive practice. Increasingly, those are national board certified teachers who are cooperating teachers with a curriculum that understands that it's knowing the learner and knowing the content and bringing those things together. And that's, I think, the vision that we need to hold, which is a collaborative vision between unions, districts, schools of education for building the profession.
How far are we away from this notion that we are or should be professionals?
Professions define themselves by accomplished practice. By definition, you can't be accomplished, as Randi said in her opening remarks, in your first year. You can't do it. No one is accomplished in the first year, probably not even the second year. It takes time. As Randi said in her remarks yesterday, why are we the only profession where experience doesn't seem to count? You have to practice. That's what all these professions talk about. They're practitioners. They have to practice to get it right. When physicians sit for the boards, 98% pass. And no one thinks that's because it's low standards, and no one thinks it's because they're geniuses. They pass because the trajectory that started in day one in medical school has been exquisitely engineered to lead to that spot. And that's where we have failed as practitioners. In our profession, we have not done that.
What's interesting is that there is a model in other professions that we can follow. And instead, and Linda knows where I'm going with this, we've chose to do accountability, not we in this room, but the powers that be have chosen to do accountability by something called a value add process. In America, in the last few years, the policy has been to invest the dollar in evaluation, not in preparation. What alternatives do we offer instead so that we actually can be the advocates that we know we ought to be when these things come up?
I have to say, when the idea of value-added evaluation came out, I was one of many people who said, hey, this sounds kind of like, it ought to work. We ought to think that, you could look at teachers, and their kids' gains and make something of it. They say we're going to predict what we think should matter for achievement, student demographics and things like that. Whatever's left over, we're calling it the teacher effect. But in that little basket is the principal effect, there's the resource effect, there's the curriculum, there's all the other teachers, there are the tutors after school, there's the parents, there's the healthcare. All of that is in this leftover piece. We call it the teacher effect. But the teacher is actually only a small part of that. In addition, so it turns out that these values are very unstable. A teacher who is given an A grade 1 year because they're in the top 20% has a 50% chance of getting a C, D, or F the next year. A teacher who gets an F grade 1 year because they're in the bottom 20% has a 50% chance of getting an A, B, or C the next year. We've seen this in study after study. What determines that flip-flopping? It turns out even when you do the statistical controls for students, classroom composition, who's in your class, actually has a lot to do with when the flip-flopping occurs. It turns out that value-added test scores as a measure of teacher effectiveness don't work. They're highly inaccurate. And it's not professional.
So
It's not professional to take an inaccurate measure and
Right.
then use that as the tail wagging the dog. My institution helped to create something called the PACT, the Performance Assessment for California Teachers. It's like a baby national board portfolio. You plan a curriculum, you adapt it for English learners and students with special needs, you teach it for a week, you videotape yourself teaching that, you collect evidence of student learning, you analyze that evidence, and it is scored in a portfolio reliably by trained evaluators who are cooperating teachers in the schools, they are professors and supervisors in the universities. We have a high reliability in scoring, and it predicts later effectiveness
Exactly.
when you do the research on large numbers of teachers.
So data is important, but it has to be the right data, not simply some regression analysis that ends up in a numeric score that no one can either explain or understand how anybody arrived at. What the National Board does is it creates a whole bunch of ways where teachers can have various different avenues to other roles in teaching and learning.
Over the years, somehow, and we generated this, we made the problem for ourselves, that board certified teachers were the elite, and we were the special group at one end of the spectrum. And that's never what it was supposed to be. It's supposed to be about accomplished practice. That's what defines a profession. Over 25 years, teachers like you have created these standards. But we haven't embedded those standards in the continuum, starting with teacher preparation. But one of the things that we're doing in collaboration with the folks at Stanford and Linda's team is we're taking the videos of board-certified teachers, those who successfully certified, and the reflective papers. They will be put into a searchable electronic database, and we will make that database available in teacher preparation programs. Now, what does this do? This puts in the minds of people in day one of preparation what accomplished teaching looks like and how accomplished teachers think. So here you are, you're a sophomore in your university, you've declared your pre-teaching, you want to go in a career in teaching, and what your professors are immersing you in are images of accomplished teaching and the analytical process that's part of being an accomplished teacher. I think that's a game changer. The next generation coming along needs more than we had. And we need to be able to say that without feeling self-conscious that that lessens us. So I may not be board certified, but I want the next generation to be that way. And over time, that will build the profession. That's what's happened in medicine. That's what's happened in architecture and engineering, all of them. But those of us who are sort of beyond the place, and we were raised in a different generation, we have to have the courage to say, we didn't have that opportunity, but my young colleagues are going to have it. And that's what I'd urge you to help us with.
And what I see the AFT doing today is setting sights on a new way of reconceptualizing schools and the profession that is rested in professional accountability, not bureaucratic accountability, that calls on all of the members of the profession to develop and share their expertise in a lot of different ways. And I think that's the key idea, to develop, share, collaborate, around the goal of the profession to educate all kids well, to reach out to families, to be a part of communities. And that extends from beginning of preparation all the way through the development of accomplished practice.
Thank you. You stay white. We love these two.